Hi, everyone. I am hopping on live today to talk about stress and hiring, stress and the interview and hiring process. And according to a recent poll that I sent out, the number one stressor for hiring managers in the interview and hiring process is time spent interviewing candidates. Now, what can we do about that to reduce stress around time spent interviewing candidates when, of course, you have to spend time interviewing candidates? Well, actually, there's a lot that you can do and we are going to talk about it. My name is Amy Miller. I'm a recruiter and hiring coach and consultant, and I also do career and interview coaching for professionals who are looking to make a shift. All right, so let's dive in. Number one stress factor for hiring managers in the interview process: time spent interviewing candidates. And before we dig deeper into that and then discuss solutions, I want to first share some of the other stressors that hiring managers shared around the hiring process. So, pressure to hire fast is a big one. Preparing interview questions, not having a streamlined interview process, not feeling confident in your candidate profile. And this one I thought was very interesting and important to dig deeper into. And that was asking for help, because a lot of times new leaders, maybe they were a star performer as an individual contributor and then they get promoted into leadership, but often without leadership training. And then sometimes, and I see this a lot too, new managers are thrown into leadership, but then also right into the hiring process without any training on how to interview best practices and tips that you want to follow, and what's the ideal process. And so without this training and not asking for help, not feeling comfortable to ask for help, this can cause understandably a lot of stress in the process. So just wanted to share those. But first, let's take a little bit deeper dive into the actual time investment, what that looks like from hiring managers during the process, because this is significant and it'll help shed some light on it actually is a bigger problem than what we probably think about. Okay, so time spent interviewing candidates, what does that look like? Well, hopefully at the start of your search, the hiring manager is having their intake call with the recruiter. And this is where you're having a conversation around what you're looking for in the profile and your candidate profile and why, but also a detailed description about the role. And I could share more about that in another video as far as what your recruiter wants to be asking and what you want to be, the information that you want to be sharing with your recruiter. Because remember, they are your boots on the ground. You're entrusting them to search for the ideal next team member. And so this is a big job, and you really want that communication there, not just at the start of the search with that intake call. You want it throughout as well, but it starts with that intake call. Okay, so you're spending time there. And then hiring managers are also spending time reviewing resumes, and the interview process as a whole is a distraction in itself, but then it's also filled with lots of other distractions. And reviewing resumes is a distraction where you're stopping what you're doing and then you're taking time to review a resume. And then if they're a potentially qualified candidate, taking further time to schedule the interview. And then if they're not a qualified candidate, then this is a further distraction, because now you're probably frustrated, not understanding why your recruiter sent this candidate. So it's an example of just one example of a distraction during the interview process. But then once you actually get the interviewing process started, you're going to have likely a phone interview, a Zoom interview, an in-person interview. You're going to be involving multiple team members, maybe from your individual contributing team and also your leadership team, who are going to participate in the interview process as well. Then maybe you're going to have a presentation or a final panel interview involving multiple people as well. So likely you're looking at 4 or 5 steps in the interview process, and depending on your organization, maybe even a lot more than that. And then I mentioned distractions. I like to talk about this a lot. I think it's important to bring attention to the impact of interruptions. And there's likely a lot of research out there on this, but the article that I'm going to reference is The Impact of Interruptions, is what it was called. It was published in UC Berkeley's People and Culture. And it's talking about how when you are focused on a project and then it takes a certain amount of time to get going, get the momentum up where you're really making some progress at a faster pace with a project. So let's say you're focused and then you get a distraction comes in, an email, or you have to break away and solve a problem or whatever it is. When you stop it, when you finish that and then you come back to the project that you were working on, it can take anywhere, research shows, from 8 to 24 minutes to get back up to the original pace that you were working at. So that means, and that's depending on the complexity of the project. So or the task. So that means this is time you're losing. Anytime you get a distraction, then and your attention is shifted away from an important project, and then you have to come back to it, you're losing time. So if you add that factor into the time taken in the interview process, that can really add up as well. So if you add all of that up, and I did, let's say looking at a conservative interview process where you are interviewing maybe a total of 5 candidates for one hire. This adds up to all of those different steps there and the impact of interruptions, 33 hours. So if you're a hiring manager and you're working a little over 10-hour work days, this is a full 3 days that you are losing in the interview process for one very conservative 5-candidate hiring process. And then what if you're interviewing 10 candidates? Well, then that is 66 hours. And then if you're an organization where you have multiple teams and or divisions who are doing multiple hires throughout the year, let's say you're looking at 50 candidates, well, then that the hiring managers are taking through the interview process, then you're looking at 330 hours. So as you can see, it's a lot of time, significant amount of time invested in the interview process and interviewing candidates. And 330 hours adds up to 1 full month of hours lost, taken away from your everyday leadership duties aside from the interview process. So I wanted to speak to that a little bit to shed some light on understandably why it's very stressful to have to spend so much time interviewing candidates. Okay, so what can we do about it? And I mentioned before, there's actually a lot that we can do about it. And this advice here is something that you likely share with your team, which is to control the controllables, focus on what you can control. So you do have to spend time interviewing your candidates, but what do you have control over? 2 big factors that you have control over throughout the interview process are communication and the process itself. And so maybe your organization already has a streamlined step-by-step interview process locked in, and that's great if you do. If not, it's very important to get a process in place. And if that's something that you would like some help with, you're welcome to schedule a call on my calendar. I do offer consulting in the hiring space, and I can help with that potentially. And it's okay and actually good to be flexible with your process, but you don't want to skip any steps. So let's say you have a 5-step interview process. And one thing that you really want to also do to eliminate or reduce some stress and some of that time spent interviewing candidates is to keep the process moving. You want to keep candidates actively engaged. And once you have a few good candidates in process, you want to keep it moving so that they don't fall out of the process and start entertaining other opportunities as well. But one thing that you may need to do in order to keep the process moving is move some steps around. So definitely stick to your process. Don't skip any steps. But maybe if the next step in the process is a face-to-face interview with you, the hiring manager, but you've got 2 weeks where you've got a really hectic schedule, maybe you're going to be away for a conference, something like that, just switch the order of the steps. Maybe the step after that is to connect with a couple members on your team. You can move steps around, and that way the candidate is actively engaged and you're still moving them through the process. And then you can also combine steps. So maybe the next 2 steps are going to be interviewing with 2 different members of your leadership team. Maybe they can do a panel interview together over Zoom, something like that. So you want to be flexible with your steps, but don't skip any steps. You want to take that time. And this is one thing I like to often talk about as well, which is that taking time creates time. You want to take the time to complete each step in the interview process to elevate your confidence in your hire. Because if you skip some steps and do a rushed hiring process, you can ultimately find out that you made the wrong hire. And this ends up taking even more time because now you have to start interviewing over again, all over again. So that's number one is the process. And again, we can talk more about that if you feel like your organization or you could use a little help there. But that leads me to the second big factor that you have a lot of control over that can really save you a lot of time in the hiring process and time from interviewing candidates, and that is communication. And when I say communication, what am I talking about? Communication with whom? Communication, number one, with your recruiter, number two, with your candidates, and then number three, with your leadership team. And again, going back to the intake call with your recruiter, you want to spend, it's very important to take that time with your recruiter. Maybe it's a 10-minute call if they are familiar with your organization and the role, and this is just a new territory, maybe. But if this is your first time talking with this recruiter, their first time working with you in your organization, or for this particular type of role, maybe you need to have a 15 to even 30-minute conversation, intake call with your recruiter. I actually am working on a role that is new to me. The organization is not new to me, but the manager is new to me and the role is new to me for me to be recruiting for. And the hiring manager spent 37 minutes on, I'm really big on time blocking, so I know exactly how much time we spent on our conversation, but I so appreciated that. And I took time beforehand to type up my questions for her, and we had a detailed conversation. And that sounds like a lot of time, and that's unusual. It doesn't normally take that much time, but maybe anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. Talk with your recruiter about specifics on the role, because this is going to save you time, because if you share a detailed story about your role and what you're looking for and why with your recruiter just one time, then they can go and do that with every other prospective candidate and be much more likely to present to you qualified, engaged, and interested candidates. The less detail that your recruiter has, the less detail they can give to candidates, and then you're more likely to waste time interviewing candidates that are not a fit because they don't have enough information just yet to know whether they're a fit. So they're thinking maybe, and the recruiter's thinking maybe, so then they move them ahead, and this can end up adding hours onto your calendar, which you can save by taking that time at the start of your search with that detailed intake call with your recruiter. So that's number one on communication with your recruiter. But then also you can save time throughout the process in interviewing candidates by continuing to have consistent, clear communication with your recruiter throughout the process. And that does not have to mean having a 15 to 30-minute phone conversation with your recruiter each week. You can follow up with text messages, with emails, and maybe quick 1 to 2 minute calls as needed. But you want to share with your recruiter feedback on each candidate. If you're passing on the candidate, let them know specifics on why. Okay, we lost internet connection for a little bit there, so sorry about the pause there. So I think I was talking about communication with your recruiter. So I talked about the intake call, but then also you want to continue having consistent, clear communication with your recruiter throughout the process, because this is going to help your recruiter keep your candidates engaged. If you are passing on a candidate, let your recruiter know why. If you're moving a candidate forward, let your recruiter know why, because this is going to help them better focus their search. And then it's going to save you time because the candidates they're bringing you are going to be more likely a better fit. So number one, what you want to improve on is communication with your recruiter. And then number two, you want to improve on your communication with the candidate. You want to inform the candidate on how they can best prepare for each step in the process. You want to give them feedback on what you like about them, why they're moving forward. And if you don't have the time to connect with your candidate, that's okay. You can give this information to the recruiter and they can as well. So that counts for communication with your candidate too. But this is so important because a candidate that is actively looking or actively interviewing with your opportunity, they are very likely actively interviewing with other opportunities as well. And just like you want to feel wanted, so does your candidate. And the candidate that you want is confident, they are skilled, and they know their value. So if they're not hearing from you, they are much more likely to fall out of the process because they don't know where they stand and they have to prioritize other opportunities and their current role. So you're going to save time by keeping open communication and consistent communication with candidates throughout, keeping them engaged because they're more likely to stay in process. And this will help you to avoid that start and stop process. I see this a lot where a hiring manager will have their ideal lead candidate, but this information was not passed along. It wasn't shared with the recruiter and with the candidate. So nobody knows. And then the candidate takes another opportunity. And then the hiring manager is surprised and disappointed. And they've got to start the process all over again. So you can see how this will add a lot of hours onto your calendar. So that consistent engagement and communication with the candidates really helps you to get more qualified candidates to the finish line, to that final interview, and it'll help you get there faster. And then that'll save time on your calendar. And then the third area that you want to improve your communication is with your team, your individual contributor team, and also your leadership team, whoever is helping you in the interview process. And one reason is that different people, different personalities are going to pick up on different things, different aspects, different strengths and or challenges, potential areas of concern with the candidate. And you can discuss that together. And if you have a concern with a candidate, you can bring that to the attention of one of the members of your leadership team so that and also your recruiter, so that they can dig in a little bit deeper there. And by having this ongoing, open, consistent communication, it'll help to elevate your confidence in your hire. And if it's time to pass on a candidate, then you'll have more confidence in your decision to pass on a candidate, so you don't end up taking more time continuing to move them forward in a process. So recapping there, very simple, but it really can, both saving these very simple concepts can help you save a lot of time in your hiring process. So improving your communication and improving the process. And the good news is you have control over both of these. So I hope that that was helpful. I have lots of examples of these, by the way. So I think of good and bad initiatives where it was a less quick process without a lot of stress. I've got examples of that. Many different hiring initiatives that went that way in a positive way. And then I also have examples of the opposite. So I think I'll do another video sharing some case studies on that so that we keep this one pretty succinct. But I hope that that was helpful. If you got some value from the video, I invite you to like and subscribe. That will help me grow the channel. And if you're interested in talking about doing some potential leadership training workshops on interview best practices, maybe tips for new leaders and or streamlining your hiring process with your organization, you're welcome to schedule a call on my calendar. The link is in the description. And you can also check out my books and my courses. There's more information available on my website. So thanks so much. That's it for this one, and I will see you soon.